my skeleton can generate 3,000 pounds loading through my femurs and my SI joint. That kind of load in exercise you would just rupture everything. You couldn't do that. But what that's done is provided me with the biologic resilience to handle a big fall that I took several years ago off of, in LA, the old TV series Batman was filmed out here in Hollywood.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Tony Molina on the line with us. Tony was a Marine team leader in the first Gulf War during Operation Desert Storm. He's a former U.S. Navy diver and Navy SEAL obstacle course record holder. He is one of the best marksmen in the world, a real-life Jason Bourne. But even more interesting than that, he's doing something that he calls biotuning, not biohacking, biotuning. He has a lab that he's doing. He loves science. He helps other, companies that are evolving with some great things. And another great fun fact about him is that I just had to ask him his age because I saw that he looks so young, and he's actually 55 years old. But his what is it? Your biologic?
My biologic age.
Your biological age is 55, but according to the testing that he's been doing, his age is 35. So he's basically 20 years younger than his actual age. Tony, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Just on that note, the chronologic age is 55, and then when you measure epigenetics, it shows up that I'm biologically 35. So I call that about a 20-year longevity dividend based on lifestyle that thus far I've put in motion.
Amazing. And I definitely want to get into some of those lifestyle things that you're doing. Let's start, though, with just kind of a brief background about yourself. Tell people about kind of the short version of the journey that you have to where you are today and the things that you're interested in these days.
Okay, so my journey started in San Diego, California, being dragged through the mud in the Marine Corps. And I went into Amphibious Reconnaissance, jumping out of planes, coming out of submarines. And then I did a tour in the first Gulf War, which we helped liberate Kuwait City and throughout that campaign, Operation Desert Shield, then moved into Desert Storm. That was kind of a kickoff point because I grew up with just my grandparents and my mother, and I didn't really have that male role model. So I went to the worst possible place for male acceptance and role model, which was the U.S. military. And the last place I thought I'd ever be was there. But my biologic father was in the Army in Vietnam, and I had no connection to him. I didn't grow up with him. So anyway, there was all this rub and friction, like the last place I should be is there. Anyway, that's where I started. I got involved with all these expedition races, and I raced professionally across the expedition racing circuit for a decade in these races that were televised. They were kind of called the Unconventional Olympics. One was called the Raid Gauloises, and one was called the Eco Challenge. And these were 8 to 10 day expedition races where you raced 24 hours a day, nonstop around the clock in unmotorized modes of transportation indigenous to the country. It's kind of like modern day Ben-Hur, and you bleed out both ends. You may handle things like 60 or 70,000 vertical feet in altitude gain, vertical gain up and down. And you're on bikes, you're on horses, you're on camels, you're in kayaks, you're alpine climbing, you're mountaineering, and you're doing this in these teams. So it kind of really redefined for me what it meant to move when you talk about the word exercise. And movement itself, that changed my paradigm. And that brought me to the science around it. I was like, okay, I want to know what's going on with all this because I'm kind of cerebral. And so I went into academia and studied exercise physiology and biomechanics, and then did a master's that had a preface in high altitude physiology. So that brought me to alpine climbing as a guide, and I've guided hundreds of people around the world across Volcano Alley through South America and all the volcanoes there at 6,000 meters, including Mexico, into the Alps itself, Switzerland and France, and all the 4,000 meter technical climbs. And that moves me into currently, which is a kind of a quiet world record attempt that I'm working on. Having been born here in the United States at sea level, I have sea level physiology. I'm going to be looking to put together this process I call Into the Ether, which is basically climbing a link up of two 8,000 meter peaks back to back in a week's time. That usually takes 60 to 70 days to do one of these. So that's a process that will involve several years. I'm in that process as well. I run a life lab, which deals with human performance and programming longevity. That's epigenetics. That involves your lifestyle influences and the habits and the rituals you adopt, which influences the control above your genes. That's epigenetics. And I'm finishing my first treatise. It's really a treatise more than a book on programming longevity, and that's going to be due out early 2024. So there's plenty going on.
What a story, man. That is some really cool stuff that you're involved in, that you've done, that you're working on. So I guess people want to know, how can I be 35 when my real age is 55? What are some of the lifestyle what do you attribute to, what are I guess let's start the biggest things that you would say, the biggest factors in getting you there?
Okay, so in our current culture and society, generally in first world countries, we have the managed care perspective when it comes to health. That means we go outside of ourselves, externally. We've farmed out our health to others, whether they're entities, institutions, they're individuals. And that process of managed care is an old paradigm. And it is not prevention based, it's symptom based. So we treat symptoms. And in our medical community, they're not to blame. They're licensed to treat these symptoms. So then we get limited in a bit of a circle. It's a circle that happens. And then people, they're not able to thrive. They just kind of survive. So the transition from managed care to precision care is really what we're describing. So we're looking at a culture and a social arc. It requires only about a 2% shift. So it's not this massive change that has to happen. Most of us are already looking at taking on things that influence our genes. That's the epigenetics, control above the genes. So that process really doesn't have a system. It's like the Wild West. And so what I'm doing and what's been going on over decades of working with individuals within the Life Lab process, doing research and development for companies and different products, and doing human research live on myself and others up at extreme altitude, is actually to look at the molecular influences that govern epigenetics. And so really we're discussing epigenetics. Epigenetics has two parts, two influences. There's the transgenerational inheritance of acquired characteristics. These are the things that have been handed down to you. And then there's the molecular influences. And those influences are based on their attributes to influence your DNA. And if you think about it, it's like this. The DNA loads the gun and your environment pulls the trigger. So your lifestyle and your environmental influences are determining where and how this whole longevity game is going to work out for you. Your health span, your well span, and your lifespan. If you can influence your genes, your DNA, the information packets, and then not need to continue to influence them, then you can confirm that the epigenetic process has occurred. So that means we don't need to be doing all of the things that we consciously, voluntarily do, potentially, that people are doing all over the place. Breathing techniques, temperature extremes, all these different processes that we're using. We want to get to the point where we've done these things long enough that our genes have been influenced. And the way you know that is how you feel. So a simple litmus test is you don't necessarily need blood and saliva to get actual epigenetic analysis. It's exciting to do it. If it's available to you, it's great to precisely do it, let's say once a year. But before you get to that point, how do you feel? How do you function? How do you look? So we're attracted towards things like skin and skin care products because we want our skin to look good. But that's really an internal process. That's a holobiome, microbiome metabolism process. So this arc that we're describing is really the transition from managed care to precision care. It goes from an external to an internal locus of control. And then we begin to trust our body's intelligence. And that means we actually start to connect. Right in the 1700s, Rene Descartes gave us this famous dictum, which actually, unfortunately, set us on a great path, which was, I think, therefore I am. And it really should be, I feel, therefore I am. So we have low emotional intelligence and we're disconnected. And now we're really focused up here, which is our second brain, right? Our first brain's in our gut. And so with the disconnect and the managed care perspective and the focus on symptom-based treatments, there lies our rub. So we don't necessarily need to wait for technology and innovation to reach us. We can kind of call that the longevity escape philosophy. It's not a bad thing. There's a huge chasm between where we are and where we want to be. And we're all kind of out here externally looking for the answers and solutions, which is normal, action-based, it's fine. It's just an external model. And the locus of control doesn't allow us to make the arc. So then how much influence really will we be doing? So there needs to be a system for that. And I can't stand protocols because humans are loaded and there's no protocol that exists that's going to work for every human. But there are processes that can work and they can influence, and those tenets don't change because we have enough of the background and the data to show us what those tenets are. And so that brings us to what we're doing here now, which is really, I see it as, programming longevity. Someone asked me, how long am I going to live? I said, I'm not really focused on that. If you look at all the blue zones and the centenarians, they're not focused on how long they're going to live. They're focused on how well they're living. And they live these lifestyles. And the byproduct comes out as lifespan's influence because of their lifestyle. So we know that much. We know that, okay, we could start creating our own blue zone. Here's the challenge. One, but only 5% of what we do consciously, voluntarily actually influences and actually makes a dent into the epigenetics, into the genes, into the genetics. So that means that 95% of it is happening subconsciously and involuntarily. So then that's where you want to spend your time, is on the subconscious, involuntary, reflexive aspect. That's where you're going to make those influences to your genes. But that's not what's going on as we're going out to get all the answers and we're activating all these solutions. They're just not actually going to probably yield the result of influencing the DNA. Remember, only about 7 to 8% of all dis-ease is genetic. So that leaves us with a good 92% that's in our wheelhouse that we can influence. So we have what's required. It does, I think, require, though, a prioritization. You need to be prioritized, and you need to be internally connected to what this is, the message for yourself. Again, a lot of people are just stuck in, rut number one. Their shoulder hurts, or they have migraine headaches, or they have some autoimmune condition. Right, the list is kind of significant. I deal with it every day. We can't get out of that process. So we're just fixing, right? We fix. We never get to the process of mastery, and we move out of an ego orientation into a mastery orientation. So, I feel like my slot is kind of paid for me, and I think I'm the right person in the right seat.
Wow, I love that, man. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there as well. I really like what you're talking about. First of all, with the subconscious mind, I want to get into how people can maybe start working on their subconscious mind. But also with regards, just to touch on epigenetics, it's something, like you said, there's a very small percentage of disease that comes from genetics, yet many people create a belief in their mind that because their parent had some disease, or they have this or that they're going to have this disease. In fact, I know someone very close to me recently who's one of their parents died of cancer, and she was convinced, she had this big fear that was causing a lot of issues for her, a big fear that she was going to get cancer and wouldn't be around for her kids and things of that nature. And I tried, and I explained to her, I said, listen, all that stuff about genetics, there's something new called epigenetics, and you can influence this. You're not destined to have anything just because your parent had it. And there's just so many other factors as well. You can look at, how did your parents eat, and how did they exercise, and or did they even exercise, and did they eat well? And there's so many other factors as well. But you are not destined to be just what your genes are, or have a disease just because someone in your family had a disease. So I really like this conversation around epigenetics, and I actually just finished reading the book The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, and he's a big advocate on epigenetics as well. So I guess people listening might be wondering, then, you're saying it's 95% or whatever percentage is, very high percentage, is your subconscious mind. How do you start to work on your subconscious mind to create a different life, or to I guess to influence your genes as well?
It's an excellent question. And the answer for sure has to do with creating autonomic nervous system anchors. So I call them autonomic anchors. And there's some easy ones to start to connect the dots and cross the chasm that exists. One of the first ones is hold your breath. When you hold your breath, if you can hold it over 30 seconds, your spleen will release red blood cells. So there's actually a performance enhancement, like you're doping, legal doping. So let's say you're lining up for the turkey trot coming up in Thanksgiving, right? It's almost October 2023. You're about to do the 5K. You spend 5 rounds of significant breath retention, attempting to increase your retention each time. And your spleen, once you hit the 30-second mark, is going to just dump more red blood cells into your bloodstream. And if you do that about 10 minutes before you do the 5K, your performance goes up, just as if you had a coffee and you had that little bit of fat activation, which also gives you like 3% performance gain, not to push caffeine. So you do that. 2, you need to be able to hold your breath for a minute with no prep. One big breath through the nose, right? The mouth's for eating, the nose is for breathing. The breathing center is behind your eyes. It's as big as your fist. So we dilate and drive nitric oxide through our nose. So you want to be a super dominant breather. If you can hold your breath a minute, you're influencing your autonomics. Your autonomic nervous system runs your blood pressure, your pulse, your respiratory center. Those are the things that are happening behind the scenes you don't have to think about. Actually, that's where you're going to make your gains. So holding your breath, it's also an IHT mechanism, intermittent hypoxic training. So it's a form of altitude simulation. So wait, you're telling me I don't have to go to altitude to get the gains of altitude exposure? Yes. If you do intermittent doses of breath retention, you're influencing your biology. That's really your job. You're biologically commissioned to influence your biology. That equals biologic resilience. When you do that, your metabolism gets more flexible. That's how we can lose weight. Okay. 2, you can use a pen to influence your posture. And posture isn't sit up straight, hold your shoulders back, and consume all the products online to affect your posture. Posture is regulated from your main sensors. Those are your eyes, your jaw, your skin, and your feet. So how do you influence those sensors? The feet, the first thing you should do in the start of the day as an autonomic anchor to influence your autonomic nervous system and improve your health is you can scrape your feet. Most people stand on shoes with socks with either asphalt or concrete all day. So we don't ever touch the earth. Part of our challenge is we're bioelectric beings. So if we're not touching the earth and we don't get the resonance, the frequency that comes from the earth, we're not going to get it from exercise. So then we start to have dysfunction because we're not able to move electrons. And that's what we do. We move electrons. So if you get a credit card or a driver's license and you just scrape your feet for 30 seconds, you kind of agitate the nerve endings. It doesn't have to hurt, but it should agitate them. That's improving the somatosensory cortex. It goes directly up to your brain and it influences the cerebellum. And the cerebellum's job is to handle proprioception. Where's my body in space and time? So literally with 30 seconds of foot scraping, you can do the hands too. This is good for your kids, if you have kids, before they head off for the day. Scrape their hands and feet because they're not standing on the earth, and you've improved their cognition. Their reaction time goes up, their strength goes up, their IQ goes up, and their postures improve. So then less musculoskeletal disturbances, less pain. Second is you take a pen and you have the eyes converge. And the process of convergence just requires a pen where you bring it right between your eyes. I'll do a demo because we have this video on. And health is literally, you can run around, once you understand this, you can run around with a pen, and anybody you care about or love or have any connection with, any friends, just check and see if their eyes converge. 75% of us have one diverging eye. And that means the brain itself isn't balanced. That's why people like marijuana. It creates brain separation. Well, we need fusion so we can be smart and actually think well. So the process involves you put the pen vertically in line with your eyes, on the level of your eyes, and you look at the tip of the pen. If you need glasses to see something up close, wear glasses. If you don't, then you don't need any extra tech. You breathe through the nose, you relax your body, and you spend 30 precise seconds influencing your autonomics. This is an excellent autonomic anchor. You could do it in the morning. It lasts 4 to 5 hours neurologically. So I would suggest you do it twice a day. First thing in the morning and maybe middle of the day. And or in the afternoon when you're looking for that caffeine stimulant boost. What you're really experiencing is mitochondrial fatigue. That's the definition of chronic fatigue. Fatigue is happening in the eyes. So I hold it and I converge. Then I relax. And then I attempt to converge again, looking at the tip of the pen. And so that precision input to my cerebellum influences my autonomics. It has a parasympathetic rest and digest process. My pulse will come down, and the catecholamines, the stress hormones, are actually they're checked. They're subdued. Super easy, very effective way to improve health and improve connect as an autonomic anchor.
You just blew my mind, because I've been studying health and listening to podcasts, and we're over 120 episodes of this podcast, reading every health audiobook, and you just hit me with 3 things that I've never heard anyone else talk about in terms of advice about kind of health and longevity. So you talked about scraping your feet or your hands or both with a credit card or driver's license. You spoke about what was the first one you said before the pen, before the scraping?
Breath retention.
Holding your breath. I never heard of people advising you to hold your breath. So let's start with that one, and then the one with the pen. Looking at that also, that is something I haven't heard of either. So I am very impressed to have heard 3 things that I've never heard of before, because I've consumed a lot of content. So let me ask you about the breath real quick. So I'm interested, because this is something that I can now start implementing. For someone just starting, what would you suggest in terms of the breath hold? Just hold, for a minute if you can. If you can't, just go as long as you can without, panicking or whatever. What's kind of the protocol for someone listening?
I think that because humans we're so action oriented, start with a baseline. So no prep, seated, take one large breath through the nose only to confirm subconsciously that you're breathing through the nose, and just time how long you hold your breath. What kind of retention do you get? Someone yesterday was in the Life Lab, and this was a woman chronologically in her 40s, biologically in her 60s after we did the epigenetic analysis. So think about that. She's 20 years older than she is sitting there. That's lifestyle. Now, the best part of that is the processes we're describing in these lifestyles and rituals, they'll make that trajectory shift, and she'll bring that down. Her pace of aging will slow, and her biologic age will ideally get closer to chronologic age, and then she can get a longevity dividend. So she could only hold her breath. You may not even believe this. She couldn't hold her breath for more than 11 seconds. Now, This is a hypoxic person. That's why the most research happening in the world is still in the area of hypoxia, why we eventually expire as humans. That's why I go to altitude every year. So if she can only hold her breath for 11 seconds, imagine, what does that mean for her pH? Her ability to use oxygen is really blunted. So her pH is acidic. So you would guess what? That she has different microbiome-related disturbances. Of course, she has irritable bowel syndrome. She has to take heartburn medication. She She chronically has energy diversion because she eats all day because her energy's low. So she thinks, I just need to keep eating. That's because she's anaerobic. So her metabolism is acidic. So she doesn't need a blood test or a saliva test to confirm that she's got chronic fatigue. She can't hold her breath for more than 11 seconds. That confirms her inability just to use oxygen. So what does the body do? It's brilliant. Our systems are so great. It creates asthma, the chronic compensation to be able to extract the oxygen because her body is breathing too much because she only can hold her breath for 11 seconds. So she's hypoxic. She has asthma. She has the GI tract confirmation of the acidity. And so just by her starting to do a little bit of breath retention, she can start to shift her ability to use oxygen. That means she can move electrons. That means her sleep will improve. That means she can get off the medicines and the heartburn medication, which if you ever had heartburn, it's awful. I've only had it once in my life decades ago, but right, it's unsettling, right? And there's an anxiety component. Anxiety is connected with hypersensitivity to CO2. That's exactly what she experiences because she's only able to hold her breath for 11 seconds. So the answer is do a baseline. What is your baseline? Get an idea. One breath, hold it. What's my baseline? Then you can start there. And then a great way to action this is, I would say, between the hours of 10 and 2, once on the hour, hold your breath. If you need to set a timer, however you want to do it. Do this for 6 weeks. We're seeing changes in influence epigenetically after this 6 to 8 week process. So do it for 6 weeks. So Monday through Friday, give yourself the weekend off. Monday through Friday between 10 and 2, 10 o'clock, top of the hour, one big breath. You're just holding your breath. You could be driving. I know we may want to say that's maybe not the best thing, but I do it all the time. My breath retention is really high and long. I can do a 2-minute breath retention while I'm driving. Okay. Now that may, again, not look like maybe the best practical thing, but I've been doing it for decades. So do your baseline, and then between 10 and 2, once on the hour, hold your breath. Okay. That's part one. The second part, foot scraping and or hand scraping. If you have musculoskeletal disturbances below the diaphragm is a good point of reference when we look at musculoskeletal disturbance. That means pain. That means compensations. That means the surgeries you don't want to have. That means the braces you don't want to have to wear on your synovial joints. So if you scrape your feet, you can improve the communication that's happening from the ground, from your feet to your brain. Any joint between your diaphragm and your feet will be improved as well as your brain. So ankles, knees, hips, back, all of the musculoskeletal symptoms and compensations surrounding them can be influenced successfully from just improving the sensory input from your feet. So you do that in the morning. That'll take you 60 seconds, right? 30 seconds per foot.
If you can do grounding, is grounding an alternative? Like if you have grass in your backyard and you go out barefoot in the grass, would that be sort of an alternative to this as well?
100%. Earthing has saved my life personally. And as an autonomic anchor with our theme in this way, yes. The thing with earthing is you need about 2 20-minute doses a day. So if you have a dog, right, you can get your microbiome diversity from having animals, right, running around, eating, right? Unfortunately, our dog right now, it's an 8-month-old puppy, and he likes to go into the cat litter. And you're like, oh, yeah, get him out of the cat litter. But actually, the diversification of the microbiome is actually influencing our health positively. Not that I'm looking to be licked by my dog as soon as it comes out of the cat litter, but if you actually look at what it means to have diversification and repopulation of the microbiome, that's why actually my health and our family's health has been improved from having the dog. So yes, you can do the earthing. You can earth and you can scrape, right? So if you're in that and you have access and you're outside and great, you're already doing it, or you have access, you have dirt, you have sand, you have grass, scrape your feet first, then step outside. You want to spend 15, 20 minutes though on the earth to get the Schumann resonance. And then you may need to do it again at the end of the day. So this is where we get to like, well, okay, I don't have, logistics. Who knows? A lot of people live vertically nowadays, right? So maybe then we need things like whole body vibration to assist us to mitigate these limitations. Or the foot scraping happens maybe in the evening because you do have a knee or a back or a hip issue, and you're dealing with a musculoskeletal disturbance. So then, I would scrape your feet twice a day. Scrape them in the morning, scrape them at night. And then the last part is the eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul, right? We've read this, we've heard this. They're also the direct reflection in your sympathetic stress response. So when you're visually looking, your eyes are interpreting whether something is friend or foe. And that is based on the oculocardiac reflex. So when you are influencing your sensory input in your eyes, you're actually reflexively influencing your health. And that's subconscious. And that's why there's value. So your stress system comes down, your nervous system gets unloaded, your reaction time, strength, and IQ even goes up. So again, right before you go in to do some test or some cognitive demand before the big meeting, spend 60 seconds improving your sensory input through your eyes, and your performance goes up, period. And it lasts for 4 to 5 hours neurologically. So if you're in a postural sequence, then I would tell you kind of want to do the eye convergence with the pen twice a day, right? Because you're going to handle 8 to 10 hours of your day.
So with the pen, for those that aren't watching on video who are just listening, you're putting this pen right up, kind of right in front of your nose. Yeah, right in front of your nose, where the tip and the kind of the tip of the pen, the top of the pen is like level with your eyes, right in front of your nose, and you're kind of basically almost trying to look. You almost look cross-eyed as you're kind of looking inwards towards the tip of the pen. And so you'll do that. You just do that for what, a couple of seconds, then you kind of release it and do it again?
Yeah. So you'll converge. You'll attempt to locate the tip of the pen for a good 3 precise seconds. Make the brain work. If you feel musculoskeletal tightness, your head may turn, your shoulder gets tight. You're like, oh, I feel my shoulder. Yes, that's because your brain is not able to use its primary sensor optimally. So then you're compensating, and you're also having an overactive stress response because of it. You see people walking around with their big pupils. They're in a stress response. So if we just treat the eyes and start influencing the eyes posturally, we can make all these influences to our DNA. And again, when you're doing this for weeks and months, then you don't have to necessarily keep doing it, because that's how the epigenetic influence happens, right? Now you've actually, long after you've stopped, your DNA has actually been influenced from your effort. Okay.
No, that's good. That's great. So just to clarify, because I want to do this for myself, so I'm asking selfishly here. So 3 seconds, kind of looking inward at the top of the pen, and then how many times? And then I go back to normal. Then I look back again for 3 seconds. How many times am I doing that roughly?
Yeah, I'd say like if you put a timer on your phone, you want 45 quality seconds of convergence. So you converge for about 3 precise seconds, then relax your eyes, and then converge again. So maybe it's 5 to 6 rounds, right, over 45 seconds. And it just, again, as with the breath retention that we discussed, get a baseline for yourself. Get someone to get a photo. All the photos in my phone, when you look up contacts, there's all these crazy photos of all these people converging. So that's their photo. And most people have a diverging eye and all the subsequent symptoms because of it. So take a baseline, have somebody sit in front of you, and when you're attempting to converge, while you're attempting to locate the precise point of the pen, have somebody capture that photo of you, and you'll see your health. You will have the glimpse into health, autonomic health, right then and there. You'll see the symmetry or the asymmetries in your face based on the different hemisphere that was overdeveloped or underdeveloped. So actually what you're seeing when you see the eyes, you're actually looking and you're seeing the brain, right? Because the eyes grew out of the brain. So it's super accessible. It's right there, right? And all you need is that pen.
I love it. Now, you mentioned you purposely put yourself into high elevation, and that is obviously something that you feel is good for your epigenetics, for your health, for your longevity. What about, is there any benefit or use for these like elevation training masks, or do people literally need to go out there and get up on a mountain somewhere, or is there any other way to kind of achieve, I guess the holding the breath is one way, but explain a little bit more about why you like being at elevation. And then also, are there any other resources like these elevation masks that are worth anything?
Yeah, great question. The thing with these masks, as you're describing, they actually just create acidosis. So we don't really want to place ourselves into acidosis, right? So breath retention is probably the safest, best way to influence to get an intermittent hypoxic training response. If you're going to do anything more, then you're looking at actually using something that involves several vectors of change, which requires a bit of biotech. And that's one of them is called the CVAC, Cyclic Variations of Adaptive Conditioning. And it's a pod. Novak Djokovic used it for several years in a performance way. But basically, it's the three vectors of pressure, altitude, and temperature. And
so like a hyperbaric oxygen chambers? Is that similar to that, or
no? It's literally the three vectors are changing, and it's like taking off and landing in an airplane 200 to 400 times in 20 minutes, and you go from sea level to 20 plus thousand feet and back to sea level 200 to 400 times, depending on the level that you're at. In a 20-minute dose, it's all passive. You're sitting there. But what's occurring is you're cycling and pulsing all your organs 200 to 400 times. So it's passive exercise, but it's really driving at a high rate mitochondrial biogenesis, right? So it actually is a driver, very accelerated driver for biologic resilience. And people, which there's many, with post-COVID symptoms can escape post-COVID symptoms through several weeks of these types of treatments. Obviously, you have to find the units, right? And they're not everywhere. You know, it's a high cost item. Most people, we're not going to have it in our homes. I've seen them in homes, which is excellent. But it's a 20-minute dose. And so I would say stay away from the acidosis, right? With the mask thing, right? That's not
no
providing altitude stimulation, right? They're very different. It's unfortunate that they're marketed and branded as altitude training. It should just be, inflammation training is what it is, because it's going to drive inflammatory process and hypoxia.
No. Yeah.
So,
so you, I assume in your lab in Santa Monica, you guys have the machine that you just spoke about?
No, I don't. No, there's actually one other device that's similar to that that's just about to come out onto the market. I'm not supposed to discuss it yet. But it's similar to what I'm describing. So no, you have to go find those units, and they're out there. They're commercially available in different spots. We don't necessarily need to, and I'm saying this because it's great, and we love the tech. We all do. Yeah. It's the challenges, again, it brings us, I think, back to that managed care perspective and the external locus of control, and that I'm going to go out to get my answers, right? Instead of trusting my body's intelligence and leading my biology, right? Biology is our first technology, to lead our biology so we can actually thrive and influence our biologic age and reduce our rate of aging and have the skin we want. So I'd say those techs are like down the road for people, and just start with the basics, right? Like breath retention is an excellent way. Yes, if you live close to altitude, like I'm in Los Angeles, California, I have 3,000 and 4,000 meter altitude an hour away, right? So I've got access. So pretty much every weekend I'm at altitude, and I'm there doing all these different alpine ascents because I'm preparing for this world record attempt where, somebody with sea level physiology is going to run up and down the highest peaks in the world in just a couple of days versus having spent months doing that. So that's, one, I need to live through it. Two, I'm confirming this process of what it means to move electrons and be a bioelectric being. That's a component of why we do things like use native energy production methods like earthing and grounding, so we can actually do these things without needing to default to food. That's a whole separate discussion. So I'd say start there. Breath retentions, and then if you can get to altitude, great. You don't even need to do anything special at altitude. Just the fact that you show up, anything over 5,000 feet elevation, your systems all kick on. And that process is activated through what's called the piezoelectric effect. And that generally happens through compression. It also happens when pressure changes shift. That's why that unit also has efficacy with the temperature, pressure, and altitude changes.
Wow, very cool, very cool. So what's the name of your lab again? And I believe it's in Santa Monica. And what are you guys kind of doing there? Like, if people, I know next time I'm in town, I'm going to want to come visit. What are you guys working on? Like, or what kind of equipment or things you doing there?
Yeah, it's the Arete Life Lab. Arete in Greek stands for excellence, and then the Arete is the ridge between two rock faces, right? Because I spent a lot of time as an alpinist, so that's the Arete Life Lab. And I have at the Life Lab, I program longevity, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm programming humans for longevity. So there's the metabolic and epigenetic analysis that we do. That happens quarterly or annually, depending on the involvement of the person. There's actually, you can just see behind me, there's the osteogenic loading device, which is called biodensity, which is basically, it's isometric loading into your skeleton, which drives the skeleton to make bone density changes. So it's not a DEXA scan, it's actually improving bone density. And remember, your immune system comes from bone marrow, right? Your T cells are built in your bones. So you're actually influencing your immune system when you're driving compression of bone. And so it's isometric. It takes you 5 minutes. You do it once a week. There's 4 movements. 3 are seated, 1 standing, 2 are pushing, 2 are pulling. I can load on my skeleton. I'm a 5'9", 160-pound frame ectomorph skeleton type. I can load 3,000 pounds through what looks like a leg press. There's no movement that's happening. In the leg press type motion, my skeleton can generate 3,000 pounds loading through my femurs and my SI joint. That kind of load in exercise you would just rupture everything. You couldn't do that. But what that's done is provided me with the biologic resilience to handle a big fall that I took several years ago off of in LA. The old TV series Batman was filmed out here in Hollywood. And there's a place called the Bat Cave. They filmed it. And I was scrambling out there years ago, and I fell. A piece of earth detached with me on it, and I free fell like 45 feet. I hit the ground with like 3,000 pounds of force. I landed on my feet. I walked away. Yes, I felt like I got hit by a bunch of bats, like I went through a gauntlet, but there was 0 breaks, no musculoskeletal disturbance, no injury. No muscular injury. Like, my system took that load, and that's only because of almost a decade of osteogenic loading with the biodensity. So my skeleton was fortified to handle the load. Basically, my body did its job, right, which is to handle the effects of gravity. And so that's excellent confirmation. And there are plenty of people that come into the Life Lab, they already either have osteopenia, it's been diagnosed with a DEXA scan, or osteoporosis. You can influence your T-scores and start. It may take more time. You can reduce the rate of loss and then eventually even build bone. So that process involves increasing your central nervous system, that CNS activation. You get to increase strength, and you also build bone density. So it's brilliant. It takes you 5 minutes once a week. One more part just within the Life Lab that's really important is the same company has put out this new, it looks like a bicycle. It's called the REV, R-E-V. It's the Power Plate REV. And actually, I think it should be in every living room in the world, because you can influence your blood sugar levels, your glycemic excursions, which were biologically commissioned to do 2 things. 1, handle insulin sensitivity, and 2, handle blood sugar excursions for the rest of your life. You're either going to take those 2 things on or you're not. And if you don't take them on for whatever reason, then you will reap the consequences of that type of lifestyle. So when you finally understand that you're going to be taking on those 2 items, blood sugar sensitivity and insulin response, your whole life, then you can use this bike without changing clothes or sweating 3 days a week with what's called REHIT, reduce exertion, high intensity training. So it's like escaping from a tiger that's trying to catch you, and all you do is sprint twice for 20 seconds. And that, done 3 days a week, along with the osteogenic loading from the biodensity, could very well be one of the longevity solutions that we culturally and socially need to kind of wash across society and influence our massive insulin resistance and our really loss of sarcopenia, right? The loss of muscle. It's all there.
Wow, this is good stuff, man. I'm gonna definitely check you out. I'm in Santa Monica definitely a couple times a year, a few times a year. I'll be looking forward to getting my age done and using the machine and would love to hang out with you at the lab. Where else? I know you got a book coming out. What else? How else can people follow you, man? You really surprised me today. You really came up with some stuff that I hadn't heard before, and I've heard a lot. I'm really impressed by you, and definitely want to know how to follow you and how our listeners can follow you and learn more.
I think in my which has not been necessarily maybe good in my whatever. I'm not the guy that's the pushing things. I base things on attraction versus promotion. So I do these TikToks every day. I dance around. I do this YouTube channel, but really what I'm doing is, I'm working on this world record because most people, unfortunately, just a lot of people don't read anymore. And so I think what can help this arc of people shifting from managed care to self-management, a precision model for them so they can function well and feel good and actually influence their longevity, is this world record construct that'll happen in Nepal over the next few years. And then, yes, this first treatise on programming longevity is going to be done this calendar year. So there's a product that was born out of that. And that product is called the Portal. And I'm actually in the Portal right now. And the Portal is a system that was authentically created so humans can program themselves for longevity. And I'm in week 4 of 8 weeks. And the Portal is done like this. You do it in the spring and you do it in the fall. It's 4 or 8 weeks long. And the reason it's those lengths has to do with that lifestyle influence for those epigenetics. And that allows you to systematically learn the systems and the tools so you can adopt the precision care so you can have all the things you want. You can feel good, function good, sleep good. You don't need to necessarily use pharmacology to do that. You can replace medications with flow. You can replace exercise with hormesis. You can start biotuning yourself. So that's actually going to have, I think, what I would call is the greatest potential scaling effect for me to influence and do my part. Is this Portal process?
Is there is there a website or something where people can sign up yet, or we should just follow you on social media in the meantime, and then you'll announce it?
That's right. I'm building it. Yep.
And what are your handles then on TikTok or Instagram or whatever social you're on?
I know I'm supposed to know all that, but I'm the longevity astronaut. I know that. I know I'm the longevity astronaut. That's what I know.
Tony Molina,
yep.
Longevity
I'm
astronaut.
Longevity astronaut. Yep. I know my website, which is the Arete Life Lab, right? AreteLifeLab.com.
Yeah. And Arete, by the way, for people listening, Arete Life Lab is the website. Arete is spelled Arete. I actually thought it was like Arete or something, but it's Arete. Yep.
Yeah, and depending, which culture how you would, if you're French, you're going to say maybe Arete. If you're Spanish, right? Here in the States, we're going to say Arete, right? And that's how it would be said.
Well, amazing, Tony. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with everyone here today. Again, thoroughly impressed, and look forward to checking you out and come visiting the Life Lab there in Santa Monica soon. So cool. Appreciate you and hope to do it again soon. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. peakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.